Good morning, good morning, everyone. June Allen here, your mentor, and I am so happy to be with you on this Wednesday morning. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're doing okay. So, today I'm going to be giving you part two. Okay, I'm going to be giving you part two of the live stream that I did yesterday about 10 things that wounded daughters struggle to learn from their mothers. Hi, thanks for joining you, Andy. Lovely to see you. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is June Allen, and I'm the founder of The Art of Greatness at juneallen.net. And I teach Black women who struggle, or I nurture Black women who struggle with self love, sisterhood, and sobriety. So I have been doing this work since, or doing my own personal work since 2009. I'm also a student psychotherapist. I've got one more year to go before I finish, before I become fully qualified. So very excited about that. But my journey began back in 2009, as I said, and I went into 12-step recovery. Just started doing a lot of my own personal work, and incorporated all of the cultural context of things that needed to be done, because that was what was missing initially from my healing journey. And so I got into this work. I became obsessed about trying to understand the cultural context of things, how racism plays a role in all of this. And this is when the light bulbs really started going off for me. So I began to share a lot of my own journey as well, began to share what was coming up for me. And because my parents come from Jamaica as well, I was able to understand how my ancestors that were enslaved in Jamaica, how that kind of got passed down, how the behaviors and the dysfunction got passed down, how the trauma got passed down. And so my journey has been very much about unpacking racism as part of the conversation of my healing process. And so that's what I teach. That's what I teach. So I absolutely love what I do. I love being a therapist, even though it's hard sometimes and it can be quite painful. But I do it because I see the growth in people. I do it because I see the relief that people get from doing this work. I do it because I know how much the Black community needs this work, particularly Black women as well. I mean, that's kind of who I choose to work with. As a part of that, heal a woman, heal a nation conversation, it is really important for Black women to be able to do this work so that we can choose better in terms of our relationships, that we can raise our children and all of that kind of stuff, and really learn how to love ourselves. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Lovely to see you all this morning. So today's topic is all about 10 things wounded daughters struggle to learn from their mothers. Okay, and this is part two. If you haven't watched yesterday's one, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that, because then it will give you some context and continuity around what I'm going to be sharing today. But before I get into that, I want to share that I also run I run a mastermind for Black women, and part of that mastermind is I'm going to be launching a book club. Okay, a book club as part of it. I kind of started doing a book club of pre-COVID, and that was really successful. I really love doing that. But obviously with COVID, I took it online, and I stopped doing the book club for a while and started teaching other things, because a lot of topics came up around it. So what I did instead was I just began to teach master classes around specific topics. But the ladies in the group asked me to come back and start teaching the book club again. So I've decided to come back and do it. And the book that we are doing is this one: What Mama couldn't tell us about love. Okay, so we're going to be revisiting all of the topics around mother and daughter, Black mother and daughter relationships. So we'll be talking about mother wound issues. The link between racism as well is going to be part of that conversation. So if you're interested in joining me and the other ladies for the book club, you can click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. Okay, so that's the housekeeping for today. So let's dive into the content. So for those of you that have just joined, my name is June Allen, and I'm the founder of The Art of Greatness at juneallen.net. So today's topic, I'm going to be sharing 5 more things in addition to the 5 things that I shared yesterday about the things that wounded daughters struggle with in terms of their relationship with their mother. Okay, so the first one is how to parent. Okay, as wounded daughters, we struggle to learn from our mothers how to parent, because obviously, with like what I was just saying about my story, what I understood was my mum wasn't able to parent me in a way that was loving and all of that kind of stuff, because she didn't have it herself. A lot of us come from a line, and I'm speaking from my own experience as well. I come from a line of women all the way back from the plant to the plantations where that we weren't taught. All of that stuff about parenting and how to look after our children was destroyed as a result of slavery, and even now as a result of racism. A lot of the stuff that we've internalized about who we are as black women, we don't have sufficient self-esteem. And just remember, it's important to remember that a lot of our ancestors who weren't able to parent, they didn't, a lot of my ancestors on the plantation, they never went to therapy to deal with all of the stuff that happened to them. And a lot of the older generation, they didn't have any therapy either. So all of that stuff that's been passed down, all of the negative dysfunctional things that they learned, they just passed it down to us because they didn't know any better, and they thought that was the right way to parent. Okay. And so, and as children, we end up living what we learn. Okay, we end up living what we learn. So we end up just carrying on doing the things that our parents did to us. We internalized a lot of the things that our mothers did and said to us. We then believe those things about ourselves, and then we find it difficult now to be in relationship. We find it difficult to parent our own children. I remember when I first fell pregnant, and I just remember I just couldn't stop crying the first time I found out. Before I even disclosed to my daughters that, I remember, doing the pregnancy test, and I was just distraught because I was just thinking to myself, oh my God, how am I going to do this without passing on all of this stuff, all of this pain and everything that I had inside me, that I'd learned from my mum, that I'd experienced in my lifetime. How was I not going to not pass all that stuff onto my child? And that's when I became really obsessed about reading about attachment parenting and all of that kind of stuff. And this is before I even went into therapy or anything like that. And it was actually my daughter that actually, it was the relationship that, my fear of passing all of that stuff down, that is what actually made me go to therapy and go into recovery, as well as the relationship that I was in that was quite dysfunctional anyway. But it was my daughter, because I thought, if I can't do it for myself, I need to do it for her. I knew that I had a responsibility to do the work that my mother couldn't do, to do the healing work that my mum couldn't do, to do the healing work that my ancestors could not do on those plantations. Okay, so it wasn't just about me trying to resolve what I needed to resolve, what happened in my lifetime, but I also had a responsibility to clean up what the mothers down my timeline couldn't clean up. And also I had a responsibility to clean it up so that my daughter would have a better choice, that she would have a better life. And so, that's basically what kept me going. That's what keeps me going. That's my why. Remembering that my daughter needs me to do this work. And I have a responsibility now, not just to her, in training as a therapist, to actually pass this stuff on to you ladies, so that you can understand that there is a different way that you can parent, that you don't have to accept the way that your mum parented you. And initially, when I first started thinking about this, it was really difficult for me to make the choice to make different decisions about how I wanted to parent. I wanted to parent differently, and there was a fear that I was going to be demonized, that I was going to be judged for wanting to parent differently to my mum. But at the end of the day, my daughter's well-being and my well-being as a mother was more important. And I also had to accept that my mum's story is not my story. Her story's different to mine, and I'm not responsible for what she did. I can only clean up the impact that it had on me. And also I then had a responsibility to do what I needed to do for my daughter. So, that was a process, and I had to do a lot of work in therapy and stuff like that to be able to unpack and to make it okay for me to parent differently, because I was afraid that, that my mum was going to shame me and all of that kind of stuff. And it was really hard. It was really, really hard. But I think, as black women, with all the stuff that we've got available to us now, it is important for us to make those decisions for ourselves. It's okay for us to make those decisions for ourselves and to say, actually, this is not how I want to parent. And I knew deep down that there were things that happened to me as a child that I just knew didn't sit well with me. And I knew that I didn't want to parent in that way. And that's no disrespect to my mum. At the end of the day, she can only parent from her level of consciousness. She did to me, she parented me the way she was parented. She couldn't do any different. But that doesn't mean to say that I have to deny my right to choose a different way to parent my child. So that's really, really important to be able to do that. Okay, so that's the first one. That's the number 6. Okay, the five I did yesterday, that was number 6. Okay, so parenting. Number 7 is how to love. Okay, I know this is a huge one, and you know, I could probably spend the whole of this live stream just talking about, how to love, about how we weren't taught how to love. But again, it's difficult for somebody to love or teach us how to love if they haven't had it themselves. Okay, and pain and trauma kills connection. Pain and trauma kills our ability to attach to people in a healthy way. And the attachment that is a healthy human being and a healthy need for every human being, okay, being able to attach and belong and to connect to somebody else is a basic human need. Okay, as a human being, that is a basic need that we have. But racism, okay, and trauma and pain and all of that kind of stuff, the role of it is to maintain control. Is to maintain control of us. So right back to the plantation, our ancestors, our enslaved ancestors, their babies were taken away from them when the children were a year old. I actually did some inner child work, some inner black child work with my mastermind a few weeks ago, and I shared with them how Frederick Douglass, he was one of our enslaved ancestors. He wrote about this in his book, that it was a regular thing to take the babies from the mothers when they were about 1 year old. And that's intentional, because if you break the attachment between the child and the parent, it does something. It breaks the attachment of the child's ability to love, because we learn how to love as adults based on how we were loved as children. Okay, how we will love the children sets the blueprint for how we love as adults. And so if for any reason you were separated from your mum, or there was abuse that was happening in around the relate, if your mum was abusive as well, which a lot of black mothers are, a lot of black mothers are on different levels, okay? If that was happening, or maybe we've just had the Windrush thing happen as well. If you were left in the Caribbean when your mum came over here to work or whatever, if there's any sort of break in that sort of attachment, that is going to have an impact on your ability to love. That connection, that attachment process that happens in the early years is your first experience of love, and that sets the blueprint for how you're going to love as an adult. So if you're not aware of that, or if you're not conscious of what happened, or if you're not exploring those things, it's going to be very difficult for you as an adult to understand why it's difficult to love. And I think that's a lot of people don't really look at it like that. They might just think, oh, well, the reason why I'm not really very good at relationships is because of the other person, or because of this or that. And you might have other different reasons why you think, but not a lot of people think about it within that context. Okay, well, what was my relationship with my parents like? That's what needs to be explored, and that is what we're going to be exploring as well as part of this book. So if you're interested in joining me for the book club, click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. So that's number 7, okay? Wounded daughters struggle how to love. Okay, we struggle learning how to love. Okay, number 8 is how to set boundaries. Okay, how to set boundaries. So again, a lot of our mothers couldn't teach us how to set boundaries, again, because they didn't have boundaries themselves. So let's talk about what is a boundary. Okay, a boundary is what feels okay for you. So there are different types of boundaries. Okay, there are physical boundaries, okay, how we are touched. There's emotional boundaries, okay, how we're spoken to, how we communicate. There's spiritual boundaries. Okay, spiritual boundaries, the relationship that we have with our spiritual self. Now, a lot of us, were raised, I know for me, I was raised in a very Christian household. A lot of us had, images of white Jesus all over the place. And a lot of us don't want to have that conversation, but that is an abuse, or that is spiritual abuse. The fact that we have these pictures of white Jesus everywhere, because what it's telling us is that whiteness is somehow spiritual and superior to blackness. Now, we also know that in the Bible, okay, if we want to go there, in the Bible it talks about Jesus having hair like wool and feet like burnt brass. How many white people do you know have got that? How many white people do you know have got skin like burnt brass and hair like wool? Okay, so that is that is crossing a spiritual boundary. That's an abuse. Okay, that's a spiritual abuse. Okay, and a lot of us don't really think about a lot of that. So when we think about how to set boundaries, or think about what our boundaries were like with our parents or with our mothers, a lot of those things were broken. And again, when we think about it within the context of racism, okay, racism is about control. And if you can break somebody's boundaries, if you can destroy somebody's boundaries or not teach them how to have boundaries, it's easier to control those people. Okay, it's easier to control those people. So whether you're talking about black people on the plantation, or whether you're talking about racism in the present day, okay, our boundaries are always being crossed. Okay, in terms of racism. So in that sense, if our boundaries are always being crossed, okay, if we're talking about physical boundaries, okay, a lot of us as children were hit by our parents. Okay, that destroys our physical boundaries. That means that it feels like our bodies don't belong to us, because I'm supposed to let this person hit me or touch me inappropriately, treat my body some kind of way, and I'm not allowed to say anything. I'm not allowed to say anything, because it's, this is what parents are allowed to do. They're allowed to treat my body some type of way, and I'm not allowed to say anything. So then it kind of makes sense why we end up in relationships where we end up in domestic violence relationships, or relationships where we're not respected because we don't know how to say no. We don't know how to say no. We don't know how to say no to our partners. We don't know how to ask for our needs to get met, because we were taught as children that as an adult, they can do what they want to us and we can't say anything. And I know this is going to be hard for a lot of people to hear. Okay, I know this is going to be hard for a lot of people to hear, to understand this. But at the end of the day, we have to, in order to do the healing work, we have to have these honest conversations with ourselves about where our boundaries have been crossed. Where our boundaries have been crossed, and how we are going to start to rebuild our self-love by looking at what our boundaries are now, and what choices we need to make in order to rebuild our sense of self through setting these types of boundaries. And it doesn't mean that you're gonna go to your parent or whatever and be disrespectful. I'm not talking about that. And actually, you don't always need to go to them you don't need to go to them in order to do this healing work. Some parents are open. Yes, you may be able to have honest conversations with them about that. But actually, in the beginning, sometimes we just need a safe space to be able to talk about these things, to be able to decide and unpack what happened. Because a lot of us are in denial about that our parents crossed our boundaries on so many levels. For their own reasons. Some of them did it because they didn't know any better. Some of them did it because, they've got their own internalized racism. Some of them did. There's so many different layers to it. And that's why it's important to have the conversations with yourself, so that you can unpack this stuff, so that you can unpack it. Okay, so that's number 8. Number 8 is about how to set boundaries. Okay, the importance of setting boundaries. Number 9 is about how to fight fairly. Okay, and this goes back to what I was saying before about a lot of our parents thinking that they can just do what they want to us. It's almost like the way that the white enslavers. It's almost like our ancestors kind of internalized all of that stuff, and then they projected that behavior. They then vomited all of that behavior onto how they parent and how they are in relationships. And that kind of makes sense in a way, because if we don't know any better, and if our ancestors or our parents or whatever are holding on to all of that stuff and they've got nowhere to put it, it makes sense why, consciously or unconsciously, they're going to put that stuff onto the people that are most vulnerable to them, and that's going to be their kids or their relationship. That's real talk. And a lot of us don't want to look at it like that. But a lot of us have internalized racism in a way. That's how internalized racism plays itself out. internalized racism plays itself out in that way, and so we end up behaving the way that our enslaved ancestors were treated by their slave masters. But we don't always look at it like that. But we have to unpack and understand this stuff in order to change it. You're not going to change it, okay, unless you're willing to have that conversation with yourself. So a lot of us end up in relationships in love relationships or relationships with our children, where if you're not doing this work, you're just going to do the same thing that was done to you. So it might mean that you end up being shaming to your child. You might be physical with your child. It means you be disrespectful to your child. You feel like you own your child. Your child is not your property. Your child is not your property. I always say that about my daughter. She's not my property. She was gifted to me. I was the portal for her to come through. And my responsibility as a parent is to raise her with respect and dignity. She's a separate human being with her own thoughts, her own feelings, her own needs. Yes, I'm going to guide her. Yes, I'm going to nurture her. Yes, I'm going to love her. Yes, I'm going to teach her. But it's my responsibility to do it in a way that's going to empower her. Okay? Hitting my child under the guise of discipline is not going to teach her anything. It's not. It's not going to teach her anything. Shaming her about doing when she makes a mistake is not going to empower her to do it again. We have to, if we really want to change the game around how we are in relationships, whether we're talking about parenting or whether we're talking about our love relationships, if we want to change the game about those things, we have to be willing to do our own work. So often we keep thinking about what the other person is bringing to the table. We have to think about what we're bringing to the table. And if all you're bringing to the table is drama and trauma and chaos and pain, that other person, it's not that other person's responsibility to do your trauma work. It's not your partner's responsibility to fix you or to parent you, because that's basically what's going to happen. You end up in a relationship with somebody where unconsciously you're looking for mummy or daddy. Unconsciously you're looking for mummy or daddy to fix you, to do what your mum or dad didn't do. And that's what happens in these types of relationships. And then you end up in a situation where the relationship doesn't work, because you've been looking for mummy and daddy in relationships because your mother wasn't able to nurture you and love you the way that you were supposed to be loved. So you're looking for that in a relationship. But what needs to happen is that you need to become your own loving parent. You need to become your inner mother. Your inner mother needs to be ignited to create self-compassion. Your inner father needs to be ignited to set boundaries with other people. Okay, that's what's important. Hi Rose, thanks for joining. Hi everybody who's joined. So it's important that you take responsibility for doing your own healing work, because no one else is going to do it for you. You have to do it yourself. So that means going to therapy. That means going to doing the recovery work that you need to do. That means seeing your therapist, doing whatever you need to do in order to do this work. You need to do whatever you need to do this work, because relying on a man or somebody else, it's not their responsibility. It's not their responsibility. You need to focus on what you're bringing to the table. And you need to take responsibility for what your mum was not able to do. You need to do that work. You need to do the work that she wasn't able to do. That's what's really, really important. So you've really got to learn how to, when you start doing your own work, it means when you do get into conflict with other people, you're going to fight. It's not even a fight. It just becomes a discussion. It becomes a discussion. It's no longer a fight. You don't have to fight anybody, because you know who you are. The fighting only happens when you feel like your needs are not going to get met, or you feel like the other person is being disrespectful. And really what happens really at an unconscious level is that all of that stuff that was painful to you around your mum or your dad or whoever it is that wasn't able to be there for you growing up, all of that stuff is going to get triggered. All of that stuff's going to get triggered. So you think that really it's your partner that's triggering you. But what's really going on is that all of that childhood stuff is being stirred up that you haven't dealt with. That's what's really getting triggered. There's a saying that they say in recovery, is that if you're hysterical, it's historical. Okay. If you're hysterical about a situation, it's historical. So that means that your intensity, the intensity around how you're responding to something, is not really about what's happening in the present. There's stuff going on from your past that's being stirred up. Okay. And if when you understand that, oh my God, it's the most empowering thing that you can do. It's the most empowering thing that you can learn, because now if I get triggered by somebody or something, in my head there's always there's always the conversation. Okay, well, so how much of me being triggered is really about this situation? How much of me really being triggered is about what's happening in the moment? Okay, how much of that is to do with that? How much of it is to do with what's happened in the past? How much of it is about a past relationship maybe that I haven't healed from? How much is it about my wounded daughter stuff, my mother wound stuff? Okay, how much of it is about all of that? Once you start to understand all of this stuff, it's going to make so much more sense for you to be able to love on yourself, to be able to understand, and you also understand other people's behavior as well. So for those of you that have just joined, hi Maureen, thanks for joining. Great to hear that you're invested in yourself. For those of you that have just joined, my name is June Allen and I'm the founder of the Art of Greatness at juneallen.net. So today I am talking about 10 things that wounded daughters struggle to learn from their mothers. And it's all in relation to a book club, okay? A book club that I'm going to be launching on Thursday, okay, in the book club. We're going to be reading this book, What Mama Couldn't Tell Us About Love. Okay, so if you're interested in that, please click the link in the bio. Go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. So the last one, the 10th thing, and this is a huge one, okay? Our mothers did not teach us how to say sorry. Okay, I'm going to let that marinate for a minute. And I know that there's going to be loads of people that watch this that are going to understand, because my parents' generation do not know how to apologize at all. And that for me is what is causing so much ruckus and grief and pain in the relationships. It's causing so much pain. And the reason why a lot of our parents are from my generation or whatever, our parents find it difficult to say sorry, is because a lot of them, okay, they're in a lot of their own shame and denial. They're not doing this work. They're not doing this work, and so they're committed to being right, because if they have to admit that they're wrong, they've got some work to do, and they're not ready to do that work. They're not ready to do that work. So then what happens is a lot of us then find it difficult to heal, because our inner children, our inner black children, that wounded child inside is so desperate to be seen, is so desperate to be validated, that either what happens is we either have to abandon ourselves because the parent won't apologize. Okay, in order to stay in that relationship, we have to be in denial ourselves about what happened. Yeah, we have to be in denial ourselves about what the parent did in order to stay in the relationship. And then that creates a wall within us. That creates a wall within us. So we really have to learn that we have to make amends to ourselves first and foremost. We have to learn to say sorry to ourselves, in the sense that, what did we internalize from our parents? How are we treating ourselves as a result of what they did to us? And we have to find a way in order to let go of the fact that our parents are not going to apologize. And then we have to decide where our boundaries are around that. I'll teach a lot more about this sort of stuff in the book club. And I have a whole load of other live streams and stuff in the library. There's a huge library as well, where I teach a lot of this stuff as well, about what to do when your parents can't apologize and whatever. Because what happens is then we get stuck in that cycle of, my parent won't apologize to me for what she did to me, my mum won't apologize for what she did to me, therefore I can't heal, I'm stuck, So Maureen saying, I encouraged and taught mine, they passed away last summer. I facilitated an end of life intervention and it was super powerful and loving. That is so amazing to hear. That is so amazing that you were able to do that, Maureen. And there are some parents that are open to doing that. There are some parents that are willing to listen and stuff like that. This is not a blanket statement, but I also know from my personal experience and from the women that I've worked with that there are a lot of parents that just can't. They can't say sorry. They can't apologize because of because that, you know, a lot of their own pain, a lot of their own trauma, and a lot of them don't want to accept. They don't want to do the work and take responsibility for how they've behaved as parents. A lot of our parents have done some horrible things. Real talk. A lot of our parents have done some really horrible things because of their own pain or for whatever reason. They've behaved in ways that have not been very loving as parents, and they don't want to have that conversation because they feel guilty, they feel ashamed, and so because they're in a position of power, because they're the parent, they're like, oh, I don't have to apologize. I don't have to apologize. I don't have to do anything because I'm the parent, you're the child, therefore I'm in the right, and you have to do as you're told. That's the energy. And so then what happens is that child feels anger. They feel sadness. They may feel shame. They may feel isolated. It puts the child in a very, very difficult position. When you're little, you just accept it because you just think that's what the parents do. But when you become an adult, okay, when you're an adult child, it becomes very, very painful because then you realize that this person, you know, you see your parent as another human being. This person has not got a clue who I am. This person is not interested in healing the relationship because they're choosing to not take responsibility for their behavior. And that creates a huge wound. And in my experience, that's one of the reasons why the black mother wound rages on so much, because there are so many parents out there that they don't want to have that conversation. They can't say sorry, or they don't want to say sorry. They see it as a sign of weakness as well. They see it as a sign of weakness. And for me, it's a sign of, it's a sign of strength. I always apologize to my daughter if I've done something wrong. And there is something really quite poignant that happens in the relationship when I say sorry to my daughter. It makes her feel seen. It also helps her to understand that I'm not perfect. I say it to her all the time. I say it to her all the time. I'm not perfect, Mum. I'm not perfect, Mum. I don't always get it right. I say, sometimes I say, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to apologize to her when I get things wrong, and I'm willing to, whether I need to go and talk to my therapist, or I need to go and find another book, or whatever I need to do, I will do what I need to do, because my relationship with my child is more important than my ego or the shame or whatever it is, or the guilt. The shame and the guilt ain't gonna do nothing except cause more chaos. The shame and the guilt ain't gonna do nothing except cause more chaos. So do what you need to do in order to build that relationship with your child. Simple. So Maureen's also saying, so much pleasure to be okay with hurt and harm. Your work is fantastic. I have shared your pages. Oh, thank you, Maureen. I really appreciate that. I really, really appreciate that. But this is why it's important for us to have the conversation and do the work, because I know that a lot of us tend to, you know, we don't want to say anything. We feel like we're being disrespectful to our mothers if we start sharing our truth. We feel like we can't say anything because, you know, well, we've already got racism to deal with, and we don't want other people to you know, I don't want anyone else to kind of think that I've got stuff going on with my mum. That's what's keeping a lot of us unwell. These mother wounds that are being passed down. Okay, these mother wounds that are being passed down. And I've worked with black men as well that are in a lot of pain around their mums. And, you know, I'm going to finish on this. I've worked with black men, okay, that have specifically said to me, I can't date black women. I can't date black women because they have so much pain around the relationship they have with their mums, that they find it difficult to have relationships with black women because of that, because of the pain that they experience with their mum, and it just triggers so much for them. It triggers so much for them that they find it difficult to be intimate with a black woman, because it triggers all of that stuff that they felt, the emasculation, the violence, you know, there were so many different layers to this. And then there's conversations about misogyny and all of that. And it's all part of that conversation. you know. And this is not, I just want to make it clear as well that this live stream is not about bashing black mothers. Okay, this is not about bashing black mothers. The reason why I'm focusing on black mothers is because that's the context within the book that I'm going to be doing on Thursday. It's within the context of the book, so I'm talking about it within that context. Obviously, black fathers have a role to play as well, but I'm focusing on black mothers because I work with black women who have a lot of mother wounds. I have, you know, that's my experience of mother wound, and I'm sharing it within that context. Okay, so it's important for me to say that. So if you are struggling, okay, with a mother wound and you need support, I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that you're not alone. And I want you to also understand that there are things that you can do. There are things that you can do around it. And you don't have to do this stuff by yourself. You don't have to do it by yourself. Okay? You don't have to do this by yourself. And there are layers to this. Okay? Your mum is not a bad person. Okay, if you're experiencing pain around your mother wound, your mum is not a bad person. She's just doing what was done to her. But it's also important to remember that your mum's story is not your story. Okay, you can change the story. And you need to do, it's important for you to do your healing work separate from your mother's story. Don't let your mother's story block your healing. Don't let your mum's story block your healing. You have the right to do the work that you need to do in order that for you to be whole, in order for you to be able to show up in your love relationships, in order for you to show up as a parent. You need to do your own work in order to do that. And that's separate from your mum's story. Do not allow your mum's story to block your healing. Okay, that's what I'm going to finish on today. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you found today's session useful. Again, if you haven't watched yesterday's one when I went through the first 5 things, watch that. That's on my IG live or Facebook or whatever, wherever platform you're watching me from. You can watch that you know, yesterday's one as well, and find that really, really helpful. If what I've said to you today has moved you and you feel compelled to join the mastermind for the book club on Thursday, then click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. If you have any questions or anything, I understand that this is a public platform. You might not want to put your business out on social media. Please send me a direct message, or you can email me info@yardofgreatness.com. I will be here again tomorrow morning. Today's Wednesday, isn't it? I'll be here tomorrow doing a Q&A as well, in more detail about exactly what's going to be happening in the book club. How does it work? What you need. If you've got any questions or anything that you want to ask me about the book club specifically, let me know, because I'll be answering them tomorrow. Okay? Have an amazing day, ladies. I'm sending you lots of love. And stay strong, stay safe, and I will speak to you next time. All right, take care, lovelies. Bye bye.